All right, welcome to our premiere episode of Two Tone Reality. I am Rez, and this is Beastat.
How's it going, guys?
Two Tone Reality, we're going to be doing little mini reviews or first impressions, if you will, of movies and video games that we can compare and contrast. Probably on a monthly basis if we feel like it. Depends on how active we're feeling. Today we're going to be talking about a movie first. We're going to be talking about Elysium, which came out this past weekend. Which we saw at midnight, and it's a movie science. It's going with the new craze of sci-fi finally picking up again, starring Matt Damon and Jodie Foster as a
Secretary of Defense.
bitch, and
Yeah, pretty much.
and yeah, it's very heavy with allegory just from watching the trailers, and I mean after watching the movie, I have to feel it's even stronger in the movie. So
yeah, I would agree, yes.
yeah, let's get into it. I guess first we'll start talking about the story, or well, let's talk about the movie first. As I said, it's Elysium. It's a big sci-fi movie starring Matt Damon as the main character, Max, a convict left on Earth, away from all the other white people because he used to steal cars.
But he does speak Spanish.
Yes,
so that's okay.
He's kind of like a futuristic Vin Diesel from Fast and the Furious if he didn't have a job. Or well, he does have a job. It's just a really awful
It's
one.
just a really shitty job that ends up making this entire movie possible.
And so we have him and his girlfriend growing up in what looks to be an orphanage with a nun or something like that with no parents on Earth. Meanwhile, up on Elysium, which is this floating ring in the sky that all the finer parts of society, to put it more lightly, have migrated to, where the grass is green, the buildings are white, and everything is clean. It's run by Jodie Foster and a Indian president, Mr. Patel. I wish I was joking.
But he's not.
It's all mitigated by robots. Everything is happy up there. Meanwhile, on Earth, it looks like Baghdad has basically enveloped the entire planet. Okay, so that's it for the setup. Let's start talking about the story. Well, what do you think of the story, Brennan?
I wasn't a fan. Like, you hit the nail right on the head when you were talking about how it just shoves allegory in your face. Like, the entire movie, I felt like, was just an allegory for immigration, healthcare, and homeland security. I couldn't help but feel throughout the entire movie that they were just, like, shoving all of these principles, like, in my face. And it was just so much that I couldn't enjoy the story that they were trying to tell that didn't have to do with these topics.
Just as a little bit of forward here, me and Brennan generally don't agree on story
Not
in anything.
at all. Never.
But I'm right there with you. This story was garbage.
Yes.
I remember looking at the trailer, and I was just happy that there was another sci-fi movie coming out because it's been a while since sci-fi's really been in its heyday. It's been about 20 years, going on 30 now. And I've just been happy that there's been all these. I mean, even
Prometheus. You've had a good string going on. Yeah.
Prometheus. I know some people didn't like, but I managed to enjoy
Star
it.
Trek Into Darkness.
Yeah, Star Trek, which I've never been into Star Trek, but I have enjoyed the new movies. And I was hoping this would follow it up, but no. The one thing I got from the trailers is that it seemed a little heavy on the allegory, but to preface this, we've both seen District 9 before. I wouldn't say it was my favorite movie ever, but it was enjoyable for what it was. It's not something I'd watch again. What did you think of it?
I respect the movie for what it was and what it tried to achieve. It is a very unique film. I really do think. I just think the execution wasn't really there, and honestly, I wasn't a big fan of it.
Yeah, the biggest problem I had with District 9 is it kind of teetered on what this movie I think fails in, where it was a little heavy-handed with the messages, and the main character wasn't particularly likable. Maybe it was meant that way, and that's kind of why I kind of left that ambiguity there and just kind of let it linger because I didn't really know what to make of it, and I just kind of said it was an okay movie. This movie kind of goes full-blown into the allegory where it's really hard not to draw comparisons to immigrations and healthcare, and I mean even at one point in the movie, I think Jodie Foster says, "Go get me Homeland Security."
She does.
For Elysium. So apparently they brought that up there with them, and left all the diseases on the planet. And it's just a little heavy-handed, and the imagery is just, it's very simplistic. A lot of people who may have enjoyed things like Avatar, where there is a very obvious heavy-handed message, but it's kind of negated by all this pretty imagery, and if you just can kind of turn your brain off, you might be able to enjoy the story more than I did. But I just kept feeling like every single word that a character said was just meant to slam me over the head with this pro immigration,
I
pro
agree.
healthcare.
Absolutely. Now, I will say that I do think the CGI was great. Like, everything looked good. I mean, it was a good looking film. Besides the Steadicam, which we'll get to
We'll get
later.
to all this later.
We'll get to that later. But I mean, the CGI. I mean, it was impressive for what it was. I think. I
Yeah.
think the story just fell short.
I'll agree with you there. We'll come back to that point later. On to more of the story. Let's talk about the actual characters. So Matt Damon, obviously the main leading role, if you've seen any of the trailers. He plays a former car thief, I believe. Apparently,
He's been in a lot of trouble.
yeah, he's been in a bunch of trouble. It's the film opens with a little foreword of him when he's a kid. He's hard life. He grew up with a nun who told him the grass is always greener on the other side and some other stuff, and gave him a picture of Earth.
Well, yeah, and Max, the entire movie, he's always been like, someday I'm gonna go to Elysium. Someday I'm going to be there.
And he's very, and this is probably one of the biggest problems I have with all these characters, is he's very, very one-dimensional. And while that might be okay for the occasional bad guy or the occasional support character, it's not really okay for a main character. I suppose you can argue that he does have a character arc here, but it's very, very superficial and obvious from the get-go,
Yeah.
like what's going to happen, because he's very self-centered, like me, I need to get to Elysium, I need to,
Well, on that note, really quick, let me just say this, just getting it out of the way, that this movie is very, very predictable. Would you not agree?
Yes. No,
Everything that you think is going to happen happens.
As soon as you see the allegory, and it's part of the reason the allegory kills it for me, is that you see the immigrations and the healthcare, and it's like, well, it's obviously showing that, like, oh, these issues are falling flat, like they're not going very well for the people of Earth. And it's like, well, is the movie going to end telling you that, oh, immigration is bad, or is it going to say immigration is good? And obviously the easiest thing to win the public's affection, which this movie does in the most predictable way possible, is to say, yes, no, immigration is good, healthcare is good, all that is good. And so that's part of the reason it's very predictable. So we have Max, who's the main character, played by Matt Damon. We'll talk about all the characters on Earth first. We've got Max, but his girlfriend, who's the most basic support character you can imagine when you hear the word girlfriend.
Well, I think she's not even in there for a love interest as Max, as much as I think that she's in there for her daughter's sake, so that Max will.
Yes.
I don't want to give it away right now, but there's a reason. Okay, Frey has a daughter who has a terminal illness. She's dying, and this basically helps move the story along and help Max come to some what's the word I'm looking for? Come to some realizations and make some choices that affect Frey and her daughter in the end.
Speaking of the daughter and allegory, there's this one particular scene where Max is talking with his girlfriend's daughter, and his girlfriend's daughter starts telling him
Right.
this story about the hippopotamus and the a ferret or something, or meerkat.
Meerkat. That's right.
There we go.
Yeah.
And it's a very clear allegory of Max and herself,
Yeah.
and she's telling it in the most ham-fisted way, and Max is getting kind of annoyed because he's like, yes, no, I get it. I know what you're saying. You want the meerkat, you, to be able to come along with the hippopotamus. And it's funny because
Stand on my back.
at that point was probably one of the most interesting parts of the movie for me, because I realized that it's like the movie was aware that it was beating me over the head, because I was Max, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
this movie was the little kid beating me over the head with this hippopotamus and meerkat allegory. And it's like, yes, no, I get it. I get that you are the meerkat and I am the hippopotamus. I don't need, what was this, 2 hours long? It felt like two and a half.
It was an hour and like 53
Really?
minutes. I don't
Okay.
know. But it was almost 2 hours long. Yes.
It felt very long. But yes, the daughter provides this very, very clever allegory for basically what I felt the entire movie was, except that her allegory was about 30 seconds long, and this movie was approximately 1 hour and 58 minutes past that. So yeah, we have her. We have Frey, which is the girlfriend, as we mentioned. We have Spider, who's a former boss of Max, I guess, when he stole cars or when he was doing all these illegal activities.
He's basically the leader of this
Yeah.
underground rebellion type group.
Yeah.
He's responsible for wrangling people up once they pay him and basically sending them to Elysium. So he gives them a ticket, and they get there.
Yeah, so he's
or they
basically
attempt to get there.
He's essentially a people smuggler and kind of a technomancer of sorts of very low tech techno stuff.
Yeah.
And so that takes care of it for Earth's side for the most part.
Yeah, we'll get back to Spider later because there is some very interesting things that happen throughout this movie that involve Spider that I I don't think either of us quite
No.
understand.
He's a very plot driven character.
Yes.
I guess is the way I should
Yeah.
describe him. So that takes care of it for the most part for Earthside. There is one more character Earthside, but they're kind of connected to Elysium. So we'll talk about that right now. There's only actually, honestly, there's really only one character on
And I
Elysium
think
that's
he's
important.
the most interesting character.
Oh, I was talking about.
Oh, you're talking about her?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm going to talk
okay.
about her first because she's kind of the one that's controlling.
Well, she's
this,
a very
this
interesting
mad
character too because
Would you say that?
I would say that only because of what happens towards the end.
I thought her accent was interesting.
Oh, her half English, half
Yes.
British attempted
For
accent.
those of you who don't know, Jodie Foster plays a malignant politician who's corrupting everything on Elysium, and
She's a bitch.
She's just absolutely hateful and stands for everything against immigrations and anyone on Earth managing to attain rights to live on Elysium. She's just the most. I mean, if she had a mustache, she would have been twirling it the whole movie. So, so we have her, and she's got a lapdog who's kind of a sleeper cell, ex-military mercenary agent guy, played by Murdoch from the A-Team.
Kruger, stop using that reference.
Yeah, but he's Murdoch though. That's what I remember him for. Another role you might remember him for, which is kind of an obvious one, is he was also in District 9 as.
But you're looking for Charlton Copley.
Yeah,
is his name, if I'm pronouncing
there's
that
his
correctly.
name, but I'm gonna call him Murdoch because it's easier for me because that's what I remember him from.
You could just call him Kruger, which is his name in the movie.
Well, his name's Kruger, but he'll always be Murdoch to me. So he oddly enough, he's supposed to play a very almost a disgusting, war criminal basically.
Yeah.
Who's kind of a sleeper cell for the government. Jodie Foster. She's not supposed to, but she'll call him in to do the dirty jobs. The opening scene has him basically mercilessly killing countless people, and they talk about his kill list, how he's killed this many people and he's raped this many women, and he's.
Yeah, I think with the first time you're introduced to him, within the first 5 minutes, they say that he kills 48 people or something.
Yeah, something like that. Basically, they just write him in immediately. They
basically make you understand that he's a very terrible person, and that is their way to do it.
He reminds me of maybe the bad guy from is it Universal Soldier or Soldier? I always mix them up. Well, pretty much probably the same in either movie. The bad guy from one of those movies where he's basically an evil killing machine. Except here, oddly enough, he seems to be channeling a little bit of Murdoch from the A-Team.
God, stop.
Well, he does though. He's very. There's scenes that feel like they're supposed to be very serious, where he just makes me want to kind of giggle more than he makes me feel any kind of malice or anything. There's one part where he's essentially talking about. He's talking about rape, essentially, of the main character's girlfriend or what have you.
Are you talking about on the airship?
Yeah, on the airship, and all through the whole last segment of the movie, he's talking about that, and the whole time it's just, it's captivating in an odd way because he's very menacing and scary, but at the same time, you can't quite understand him, and his accent is kind of silly.
What do you mean? Yeah, no, that's probably one of my biggest concerns with him is that okay. You can understand a single word that he says throughout the entire movie. I was having to just kind of put my ear towards the screen, even though I knew that wouldn't do anything.
I
just in an
you
attempt.
Several times during the movie, I know I asked you what he had just said, and you just
I don't know.
shook your hands at me. I didn't catch any of it, and our other friend appeared to be asleep, and I didn't want to wake
45
him,
minutes
so,
into the movie, he was lying down in the 4 seats next to us.
Yeah, he seemed very content with just staring at the ceiling. So yeah, he's just an oddball character. So that kind of lays down the groundwork for the characters and the backstory. And they're just it's just kind of an odd mismatch of Jodie Foster, who's very one dimensional with an odd accent.
Our protagonist Max, he's very very one dimensional as well.
Yeah. And he's the one that undergoes the most changes, but it's very obvious, and it's just one point 5 minutes from the end, he just suddenly changes his motivation.
And like I said earlier, I think Frey is really only in this movie.
She's very, very flat. Like she doesn't feel like she really has a character besides. I mean, she's a nurse, and so her character is just kind of like I care for people.
Her character doesn't serve a purpose really, except
I
for
feel like honestly we could have just had just her daughter just be like just a random orphan, maybe from the same orphanage that Max grew up on.
yeah.
I keep wanting to say Matt because Matt Damon
Same
playing
thing.
Max.
Yeah. So I guess that brings us to the tone and atmosphere.
Probably the strongest elements I would say in this whole movie. They do a very good job of Earth. Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, imagine every picture on Google you've ever seen of Baghdad and just kind of stretch that across the entire planet. Not necessarily a terrible place to live, just very dilapidated and very rustic, I
Everyone speaks
guess.
Spanish.
Yes, oddly enough, there's kind of a weird mix of we've got the planet Earth where everyone speaks a little bit of English and mostly Spanish,
Yeah.
and then we've got Elysium, which speaks mostly very good proper English and French, and those are the
Yeah.
two languages we hear in the movie. Is kind of dirty English and Mexican.
Well, and if you want to go back to the whole immigration thing, another like reason why you can, or one of the ways that you can tell like it is so obviously pounding it into you, is the fact that almost everyone on Elysium is white.
Yes, every single person we see a single non-white person, and it is the president, which we mentioned earlier, Mr. Patel, or I guess Commander in Chief Patel in this case, who really is only in I think maybe 2 or 3 scenes in the movie. A scene early on where he tells off Jodie Foster. A scene later on where Jodie Foster tells him off, and then one scene toward the end which is pretty much non-functional for him. So he's basically a throwaway character. It was kind of odd that they chose to even bother having him in there. He didn't
Yeah,
really
it
seem
doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
the only real reason is just to show a little bit of political strife between like not everyone on Elysium loves murdering babies, but that's pretty much the only reason he's there. But yes, the tone and atmosphere. I mean, Elysium is it's a very clean cut atmosphere, very pretty looking. Probably one of the strongest parts of the movie cinematically. I mean, I've seen a lot of dirty sets before in movies, and so Earth wasn't really. I mean, if you imagine District 9, like it's almost the same. I hate to draw comparisons because I know
No, I
people
was
are trying
actually
not to.
just thinking that
Yeah,
is that
it's
it's very similar to that.
yeah, the alien ghetto in District 9, the cockroach ghetto. It's basically that just stretched across the entire planet. And so maybe that's why I wasn't unimpressed by it. I mean, there's definitely some interior shots shown that very much show like this place is very lived in, very old, and very dilapidated. Just no one takes care of it anymore. Very derelict. But Elysium I thought was probably one of the shots of Elysium at least were probably some of the best, especially early on when they're not using the shaky cam, because you get a very clear view of just this very pristine, and it's cool. I mean, if you've ever played Halo or if you remember the Citadel from Mass Effect, for those of you nerds out there, it's very similar to that kind of feeling where it's just really cool to kind of see the horizon stretch upwards in a ring shape.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it's just kind of cool to see it go up there and spaceships circulating around and things like that. And it's very clean, white, sterile, with very beautiful, lush green grass and swimming pools, Olympic-sized swimming pools everywhere. There's a couple of cool aerial shots.
I think if you want to give someone the most amount of credit for this film, I would probably give it to the set designer and the production designer. That whole team, I think that they did an excellent job trying to convey both sides of this like Earth and Elysium. I think that they're so opposite of one another, but yet they're kind of the same in a way.
And before we got into this review, we had been looking up other reviews on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, and one of the things I do see recurring is a lot of the positive reviews mention very heavily the tone and atmosphere. Everyone generally agrees on other points. It just seems that they're not as important to other people as they were to us. But the tone and atmosphere, I will give anyone. That is probably the strongest suit in this movie.
No, I
Probably the
agree.
highest point.
I agree.
Very well done, even compared to the last couple sci-fi movies we've had come out, which are all very large budget, very intricately designed movies. It's one of the things I have a lot of praise for. There's not really much to say besides that it's just very cool. There's a very cool juxtaposition of Elysium next to Earth and these shots together when the camera is holding. And yeah, there's really not a whole lot to say about that. So in that vein, talking about the camera, that was actually one of the biggest problems that I had with this movie was the camera was very
The steady. Let me just go off by saying that when I watched Man of Steel, I remember looking at the very first scene that took place on Krypton, and I was like, this Steadicam operator needs to be fired because it was just so like shaky. I mean, it was to the point where it's like I understand a Steadicam's purpose, but there's a point where it's just like, come on, guys, like
there's a certain
this.
point where you can't understand what's happening on the screen,
Yeah,
right?
and now the thing in Elysium is that it does the same thing, like, but it does it in a way where it's like you'll have these steady cam like shaky cam shots, and then it'll go to a static shot where it's it's on sticks and it's just a static shot, and it's so jarring to the eyes that it
There's parts where you can tell what's going on, and then in between, like just these short 3 second cuts of just shake, shake, shake to remind you that it's an action sequence, so that you remember that. Or like sometimes it's not even an action sequence. There are a couple shots there with people just walking and talking, and it's just shaking because it's like, oh, like got to keep the audience interested. Maybe if we shake it up a little.
yeah.
It's just I wasn't a big fan. I always hate shaky cam, especially in movies like this that are really supposed to showcase. I mean, if you discount the story, which I feel maybe I've put unnatural emphasis on, this is a sci-fi movie, and a lot of the reason that people go and watch these things is because I mean, in the trailer, what you see a lot of cool action, cars exploding and people being blown apart and things like that, and I mean, yeah, the scenes they were well choreographed and they were interesting, but the way the camera framed the action left me confused a lot of the time. There were lots of sequences where I just couldn't quite grasp who was shooting at who and who had the advantage, and it just kind of took away. It kind of takes you out of the movie and it takes all the tension away because you just stop kind of caring because you can't your mind isn't moving as fast as the camera is and you just kind of give up.
Well, yeah, my whole motto, like one of my main mottos has always been that, like, you know, if you confuse the audience, you've lost them.
Yeah.
Because even if you lose them for a couple of seconds, they're gonna be lost. Like, they're not gonna know what the hell's going on anymore.
They're going to spend the entire scene trying to catch up to the scene, and they're never really going to experience anything you've laid out in front of them. Because as soon as you lost them, they're playing this constant game of catch up, trying to catch up to, okay, what just happened there, what just happened there, what just happened there, and they're not in the scene. They're like 10 seconds behind it, trying to figure out what's going on.
I mean, it has to be engaging from the beginning to end. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
But the choreography of the scenes, I think we would both agree was very cool. There were some neat gizmos. There's mines that attach to people and make them explode, and there's a rail gun, and there's a gun that like blows up projectiles slightly in front of the target, so it's absolutely sure to make sure nothing is left of the target.
My favorite gun in the movie actually was when they're trying to get I forgot his name, but they're trying to get the guy that they're wanting to steal the
the white guy that runs all the factories.
Yeah, that runs all the factories
in LA.
They're trying to get him out of the airship, and they use the gun, and it like makes different shapes, and then they find like a shape that works,
right,
like that
right,
circle,
yes,
and then it like just burns a circle into that airship. I almost
forgot about that, but yes,
that was my favorite.
You see it for a flash of a second, but yes, there's a very cool breaching tool kind of gun thing. There were a lot of really creative guns, which is kind of a carryover once again from District 9, which also like one of the things I liked about that movie was it had interesting alien weaponry, and this is human weaponry, but it's all sci-fi, so it's all basically the same thing.
I think on that note too, though, I think that might be another weakness to the movie, though, is that they don't really give you enough time with each gun. So whenever they actually do something like the rail gun at the end,
I felt that was a combination of a failure of communication with the camera and the audience, and the actors and the writing and the audience, where I just felt like there's a scene toward the end where Matt Damon's character
we're in spoilers now, by the way.
Yeah, Matt Damon picks up a random gun off a wall, and he starts shooting at a guy around a corner with it, and naturally your mind kind of flips to that typical like standoff type thing where the guy hides around the corner and the bullets kind of shave over his shoulder. And the guy keeps running down the hall, and I thought it was very odd. And then finally, he gets skewered by a hail of projectiles.
And he's way away.
Yeah, he's way down that hallway, and it took me a couple seconds to. I was looking at it, I was like, how did he shoot through like like I assume solid metal or steel or reinforcement or whatever Elysium is made out of, super space titanium. And then it pans to a shot of him, and I don't believe that this was shown before when he picked up the gun or anything. There's no normally you would show like a small close up to show what he was holding or something before he started firing. But in this case, it was kind of flipped where he fires, he kills the guy, and I'm like, how did he kill him? And then it shows a close up, and the thing is called like chem rail or something, and it's kind of understood that it's a rail gun that shoots through walls. And so it's just kind of moments like that where once again you're lagging behind the action, and you're kind of figuring it out while you're supposed to be enjoying it, and that kind of takes away from the enjoyment because you can only enjoy it in the moment, but you spend that time trying to figure out what's going on instead, and so the enjoyment is kind of lost on you.
Cool weapons. I just don't think that they effectively used some of them.
Yeah, some of them I felt. I mean, if you're gonna go with a straight up action movie with a lot of cool effects, showcase your weapons a little. Like, I mean, give them some flair, give them some introduction.
Well, they literally use every weapon once.
Yeah,
They don't use any
no
of the cool weapons.
reused weapons, and I mean that would normally work to their strength. It's just each time you don't get a introduction to the weapon or anything. I mean, these aren't characters, although one could argue they almost have more depth than some of the characters in this movie. but I mean, just show what it is. I mean, they had a proper the one part where they're in the situation where they're trying to steal the data from this one guy, and the guy is shooting around a corner, and he's very clearly got a visor on that's meant to look around the corner as he's firing with him. That one I felt was the one where it was properly introduced, where I knew what was going to happen before he pulled the trigger, and I understood, like, yes, this is a gun that shoots around corners, and that was very cool. But most of the guns,
that was the one that ended up killing the guy too.
Yes, exactly. And so like, I mean, that was all well done.
I don't think it worked out very well.
Yeah.
I don't think it worked out the way they wanted it
Yeah,
to.
but you know, like that one was introduced properly, and so I mean that was one of those scenes I liked because I mean that weapon isn't even particularly interesting because I've seen it before in like Wanted and stuff, but well, similar variants in movies like Wanted. But at least they was introduced, so I knew what to expect when he pulled the trigger, and so it was cool. I got to sit there and just kind of drool over myself while he was firing round after round. But
because you're a big gun fanatic.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I love guns. I love anything that shoots projectiles over vast distances very quickly, things like that. And so that one was really cool, and a couple other things that were vaguely introduced. But a lot of them just kind of come out of nowhere and just kind of catch you off guard, and your mind is kind of figuring out what is going on while you're supposed to be enjoying it, and so like I've said, and it just kind of takes away from it.
Here's a random thought before we move on, because I think I'm the only one that caught this, but did you notice that the car that Matt Damon's driving earlier on in the movie when he first gets the suit, whatever it's called, is a GTR?
Oh yeah. All-American, right?
Yeah, and this is 2189 or something.
Oh,
I probably have that date wrong, but it's close to that.
Yeah.
And it's still functional.
It's a hand-me-down from his grandfather was a mechanic, and his grandfather was a mechanic, and
it's only like 200 years old.
Yeah, it was handed down. I mean, they still have oil in the future apparently on Earth, even though they don't have anything else.
I guess what I'm bringing up with that is that was obvious product placement.
I didn't notice that, but that was also because I was noticing the car next to it was just a GMC. It just had a big old GMC logo, and so I was looking at that. So when you were asking me about that, I was actually looking at the other car because that just had logo straight up on the front, and so I was like, oh, okay, yes, very good one. Like someone has to pay for this movie, I suppose.
I guess.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, so this is going to be hard into the spoiler section if we haven't mentioned that already.
We're discussing plot holes, and I think we're gonna discuss the ending a little bit here.
Yeah, so couple plot holes here and there. There's just odd like little inconsistencies in the movie, and I mean this is for people who are actually paying attention to the story. If you came here to watch stuff explode, you'll probably generally be fairly pleased with it.
I think if you like District 9 and you like Neil, I feel like Neil Blomkamp, he really is, has a set audience for his style of movies. I think if you like District 9, you'll probably like Elysium.
Yeah, I feel maybe a lot of the time the allegory isn't as malicious as I
because there was huge allegory in District 9.
And I imagine sometimes he just kind of sees it as a canvas to paint an action, like a extended 2-hour action sequence over, and maybe he's not really thinking about the allegory as anything other than that. It's just really bothersome to me, and maybe it's because we happen to live closer to the border, so it's more of a issue here. But it's just kind of annoying because we get beat over the head with it regularly, and seeing it in this movie doesn't make it any more enjoyable. But yeah, so we've got some odd inconsistencies in the plot that just kind of bothered us while we were watching
I think the one that we both turned and looked at one another right when it happened was Spider landing on Elysium.
Yeah. Spider is the smuggler that we talked about earlier, and early on in the movie, we're treated to a scene that we mentioned with Kruger, where Jodie Foster sees three smuggler ships, basically carrying a bunch of immigrants to Elysium. All the poor immigrants, all they want is like a little bit of free healthcare before they go back to Earth, and she calls in Murdoch Kruger
Kruger.
Kruger.
It's Kruger. It's not Murdoch.
She calls in Kruger, who's Murdoch, played by Murdoch, who pulls out a big rocket launcher that fires a bunch of rockets into the sky, apparently interplanetary rockets that shoot down two of the ships and kind of, I believe the last ship kind of gets knocked off course and does a crash landing sequence or something of that nature. And it's basically just setting up that they have a very strict defense system in place for any kind of smuggler ship. This one was supposedly cleverly disguised with all its crew having DNA prints and all this to appear to be Elysium citizens when they were not. It's just setting up that there's a very, very complex defensive system around Elysium. And later on, we have a sequence where Elysium is on complete lockdown, like in a military state, with Jodie Foster basically stepping over the president to handle the controls. And she has like we've never actually see the front of it, but it's understood that she has some kind of space watch that gives her notifications or something on her wrist, because she always looks at her wrist before something in the plot happens. Maybe she had the plot on her wrist, but she looks at her wrist and she's clearly aware that Spider is landing on Elysium, or well, not even landing on Elysium. He's en route to Elysium from Earth.
Yeah.
And in the very next shot, I think we see Spider landing completely unharmed, and just no one
says anything.
No
about
military
it.
there.
No military.
Yeah. He's just like, all
no
right,
citizens.
Well, yeah,
just nobody's there.
He lands and he looks around and he's like, "Whoa, is that easy?" And he just kind of runs off and starts.
Because he follows Max there, and because he tracked Max's Max without him knowing,
which is another plot
hole we'll discuss in a second.
Where Max actually mentions just communicates with Spider and is like, "Hey, I need you to get to this," and it's like,
how did you know?
Yeah, we're sitting there and we're like, you didn't know there was a tracking device. It was on his back where he can't even scratch his back with that exoskeleton on, much less look at it, and he just suddenly knows that, like, oh, of course there's a tracking device on me. Spider's here. He landed safely. Spider, I need you to go do this. And it's just kind of odd that there's no communication other than that. It's just, Spider, I need you to go do this. And it's like, how did you know he was there?
Well, and the fact that he can get communication with him so easily.
Yeah, just even though there's just no way that they don't have any channels between each other set up beforehand, because one of them didn't know the other one was. I
think the main concern there though is Max would have no idea of knowing that Spider was there.
And so this scene is shortly after another, I don't know if I'd call it a plot point, it's just another strange quirk to Kruger's character. There's a scene toward the end where they're on a ship and Matt Damon is holding a live grenade with the pin pulled and the handle pulled in.
It's kind of his way to ensure that he'll get on Elysium.
Yeah, it's his life insurance policy is a grenade that he holds in his lap. And so, of course, there's a tussle on the ship right before they land on Elysium, so they can have an elaborate crash scene. And
which makes no sense why he would wait until they were in Elysium airspace to actually try to like grab the guy has a live grenade. Why would you try to grab him from behind?
Kruger's character doesn't make a whole lot of sense in this movie. He just seems like he likes raping and murdering things, and he's never really. He doesn't have any depth besides. I mean, his depth is essentially that he wants to hold a gun and then pull the trigger while it's pointed at someone. Is basically the whole character arc he has going in this movie.
And talk really funny.
Yeah, and talk in a very strange pseudo-futuristic Australian accent of some variety or something.
When I say that I can't understand anything that he says, like, I'm being 100% serious.
I'm absolutely with you.
I could not understand. I probably understood about 10% of what he said.
The director's cut of this movie will most likely include subtitles for his character. Anyway, so there's a tussle on the ship. They have an elaborate crash sequence, and during the sequence, the aforementioned grenade, Matt Damon's character Max accidentally lets go of the grenade because the ship twirls upside down and left and right and back in time. and he lets go of the grenade, and it lands. I couldn't tell because of the shaky cam, but I
It
think it's
lands
understood.
really
It lands,
close,
yeah,
like
incredibly close to
right
Kruger's.
beside his feet, basically, where
Yeah,
he's looking down at it, pretty
yeah,
much.
and it goes off and blows off his face, and in my mind, I was looking at him, and I was like, well, that's the end of Kruger,
I mean,
isn't
it
it?
blows off
Yeah,
his
I
face. Like, he
his
has no face.
he's missing a set of eyes, his nose, his upper mandible, and basically about I'd say about 50% of his head matter. There's not very much there, and then later on there's just this scene where the med bays that we've mentioned that just cure cancer and everything, the his two cronies walk up with his lifeless corpse, and they're
He's
like,
gonna be pissed
yeah,
when he
he's
wakes
gonna
up.
yeah he's gonna be mad when he wakes up, and it's like what
Yeah,
I don't think
I think
people
he's
don't wake
dead,
up from
guys.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
people
Like,
normally
oh
don't.
no, his brain's still
Yeah,
intact.
and keep in mind, he blew up. There was a crash landing. Matt Damon escapes with the kid and his girlfriend, and they're running around. And the two cronies pick up their. Oh no, they go and report to command or something, or go and I don't know, juice up or something. And then they're like, oh, should we go get his body?
I
And they're
suppose.
yeah, yeah, bro. Like, let's go get his body. And so they go back and they drag his lifeless corpse. And I figured they were just gonna loot it for, I don't know, like his lunch money or something.
I somehow had a feeling that he wasn't dead, but I didn't know how they were going to explain it.
Well,
Because it's really hard to fucking explain.
yeah, and I mean I sat there and they drag his corpse and it shows a couple close ups of his well I would say his face, except it's just his lower jaw, and um and then suddenly there's this line that just mentioned where it's like, well, he's gonna be mad when he wakes up, and it's like, wakes
Like,
up from what?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there's not very much left to wake
he's
up.
dead. He's not in this movie
Yeah,
anymore,
and then they
right?
just put him under one of the med bay scanners, and like 10 seconds later he's got a face again, and he's pissed.
Apparently, this medbay can do everything.
Yeah, and it's just restricted to only Elysium.
Which makes no sense, and we'll get to that later,
yeah,
too.
so yeah, that scene was just, it's not really a plot hole, it's just very, the tone is almost comical to where it almost becomes like a Bugs Bunny cartoon at this point.
I want to bring something up about that portion as well. I was talking to you about it earlier, and I don't think I mentioned it yesterday when after we watched the film. But I thought that scene was just so violent that it was just unnecessary. Like, I'm all for violence if it serves a purpose.
Mhm.
But I feel like this violence was in the movie just for the sake of showing his face like that.
That scene and the one other scene that I mentioned earlier with the mine gun that attaches to people, which seems like an odd, like, why not just have it blow up people, but it attaches to them and then waits 10 seconds and then they explode, and I guess it's just kind of a fuck you moment where it's like haha,
it gives them enough time to be like, oh shit.
Yeah,
and then
it gives them enough time for the camera to zoom into their face, and they get to, they hold up the sign that says like help, and then they explode, and there's just like little chunky giblets that fly everywhere, and then we have this scene with the close up of the not face, and these scenes are just very jarring because the rest of the movie is, I mean, it is gritty, but it's not a horror movie. It's not quite Saw.
These scenes go out of their way to show you how violent they are.
It's just very odd where and it ties in with this whole inconsistent tone I've been talking about with Kruger's character, where he's hyper violent, but he's also kind of almost like an anime character, kind of like just goofy bad guy type. Or something, and the whole movie just kind of has this inconsistent tone where sometimes it's like, oh, he's really evil, but he just got his face blown off, and boy, he's gonna be pissed when he wakes up.
And we did look at a lot of reviews before we actually started doing this, and of course, I mean, we look at reviews probably a different way than most people look at reviews, but a lot of people one of their favorite things about this movie was his performance. They were praising this performance.
It seems, and a lot of those reviews, I mean, it's not that they didn't detect what we were talking about. It's like they thought it was
intentional.
A lot of them enjoyed it. A lot of them enjoyed the kind of like weird back and forth where sometimes he's a scary psychopath and other times he's kind of a goofy mustache twirling, like,
the guy is...
Yeah, the guy with the weird voice who you can't quite understand.
No.
Yeah, he's just a very, very strange character. I don't want to say hit or miss because it seems like everyone else enjoys him, but I didn't. I liked him, and his other movies, and I thought he did an okay job. But here he's just very strange, and I mean he's proven before that he knows how to speak English, but in this movie, it just really the language fails him. Moving on to other, the last two major plot points that I can think of are at the very end. The whole point of this movie is Matt Damon has stumbled upon a code that will rewrite Elysium's citizenship program so that everyone can be a citizen of Elysium and receive medical treatment. And the computer screen we're treated to toward the end when he puts the code into the mainframe or whatever,
which is fatal.
Yes, fatal to him. Kills himself, and we see the screen, and it says Earth citizens or Earth people, citizenship status true or something, and it's just this like one little line of code where suddenly like everyone on Earth is suddenly an Elysium. And the president and all his security guards like pile in.
What did you do?
Yeah, it's like, what did you do? There's, and it's like, is there no like, do they not
Command
have
Z?
Yeah, is there no
like no
Control
way
Z?
to...
There's no undo button on that because it's literally just. I mean, I could understand if they were all mixed in with the other Elysium citizens, because that might be a little more annoying, to kind of come to like pull apart. But here we literally have Elysium people and then Earth people, and then Earth people just suddenly becomes, oh, they have citizenship status.
Well, wouldn't all the information needed to rewrite it be on the screen anyways?
Yeah, exactly. So you'd think that like once the president goes in there, he's like, oh, okay, and you just like one hand the keyboard and just kind of fix everything that Matt Damon did. And so it was just kind of an odd, maybe I was being a little too technical with it, because this movie isn't, it's more of a romanticized sci-fi, and it's not really meant to be hardcore, like, explained Star Trek sci-fi.
Right.
Star Trek as in the episodes, not as in the movies. The movies are obviously more fantasy sci-fi. But yeah, maybe I'm just reading a little bit too much into that. But that bothered me, just as a kind of a computer guy. It's just
I mean, the way he acted, it's like, there's no way that you can change, Earth citizens being Elysium citizens now. And it's like, well, obviously they weren't citizens to begin with, so you did something before that.
It just seems a little anticlimactic, because it seems like it would be very simple to undo that. But that's a small little infraction in the plot that I won't really rail on too much.
And when we were talking about earlier why his girlfriend, which isn't really his girlfriend, but she and her daughter are in the movie. This is where it kind of comes full circle, and you understand their importance to the story, is because Max is sacrificing himself to not only save the people of Earth, but to allow this girl's daughter that has a terminal illness to get the treatment that she needs so she'll be cured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And keep in mind that Max received a fatal dose of radiation at the beginning and was going to die anyway.
Yeah.
And so basically he's gambling the entire healthcare system of everyone on Earth, the 10 bajillion, million, gajillion, however many people there are 100 years from now in the future on Earth, and the girlfriend he really cares about's daughter, gambling their lives against his 2 days he has left in whatever from dying of like mega super radiation cancer. I was glad though that for once radiation actually did what it's supposed to in a movie instead of turning someone into a superhero. So that is a plus.
You didn't want him to get bit by a spider?
I thought like maybe one of the robots would bite him in the chamber and he would become half cyborg.
He would turn into Will Smith.
Yeah, and this was actually a clever setup for maybe like another I almost called it the Avengers, help me out here. League.
What?
Justice League. There we go.
Oh.
Cyborg from Justice League.
Oh.
You'd get bitten by a robot and you would turn half cyborg and you become cyborg.
Yeah, that's stupid.
You don't think so? Okay.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Oh, it's no stupid
Yeah,
than any of the movies.
Sense.
Anyway, so the last little infraction in the plot is very strange because it comes right at the end and it's just very blatant. Elysium is shown early on in the movie. Everyone's house just has a med bay that just cures everything. Absolutely anything you have, from a sore throat to terminal cancer, is cured within seconds.
And it looks like they check themselves every day.
Yeah, it seems like a woman at the beginning gets out of a swimming pool and is like, "Oh, let me go lay down in the med bay because my back's kind of sore," and it does it once over and it's like, "Oh, you have super duper cancer. Like, let me just get that out of you." And she just
well, not quite that, but
yeah, something like that. I don't know. And 4 seconds later, she's fine. And it's shown that almost everyone's house has this in the movie multiple times. People's houses are broken into, and every single house seems to have.
When the citizens of Earth crash land onto Elysium, They all like just start running
Yeah,
for
they just
random
run to the
houses
closest house
because they know that every single house has a med bay.
Yeah, exactly. Every house on Elysium has a med bay, so it's just shown. I mean, the first house that the first lady in the movie is shown to break into has a med bay. The what was her name? Frey.
Frey. Yeah.
Frey. I mean, she and her daughter break into the first house they see, and there's a med bay in there. And so at the end of the movie, we're treated to this shot of Matt Damon has saved everyone by sacrificing himself so heroically. And Elysium, since everyone is a citizen, automatically deploys just this long series, this long convoy of medbay ships that have apparently just been sitting on Elysium forever. Keep in mind that everyone on Elysium has their own medical bay center in their house, so they would have no use for this. There's these drop ships with 20, 40 med bays on them.
It seems like their purpose was to be
used on Earth.
Used on Earth?
Yeah, used on Earth.
Which makes no sense.
Where there's, I mean, there are Elysium citizens that have like part-time jobs on Earth where they come and boss people around for a little bit before going back to sip their space wine or whatever. But I mean, it's one per, like one every city. I mean,
yeah,
that one guy seems to be the ruler of the entirety of LAX, or not LAX, LA. And
these shuttles have like 20 med
Yeah,
bays.
these shuttles. I mean, clearly, do they need 40 med bays for one Elysium citizen? Probably not. So the logic there is that yes, these were indeed intended for the masses.
That's what they had to be built
random
for
citizens.
in the first place.
And so this whole movie, you get to the end and you realize that everyone on Elysium was just holding these hundreds of medbay ships with thousands of these medbays, individual medbays that could have been used for citizens that don't really seem to need any power or anything to use. I mean, they don't seem to take up any resources.
Yeah, from our knowledge, it looks like
it just seems like they just run on. I mean, happiness and magic and rainbows that just grows on Elysium.
It runs off of cancer and
apparently it just eats the cancer and then it just regenerates off of that. But yeah, so these ships are just deployed, and you're just like, wow, everyone on Elysium. I mean, not that they haven't been already up to this point, but everyone on Elysium is an asshole.
Yeah.
They've just been sitting on these, and they're like, oh, people on Earth have cancer and stuff. Well, we could let them get better, but let's not.
Well, they make it a point to make everyone on Elysium
despicable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, there's not one likable person that lives on Elysium in this movie.
That ties back into what we said about the characters. They're all very one-dimensional. Even the people that aren't really characters that are shown for split seconds. Everyone on Elysium, they're swimming or playing racquetball, or none of them are working or doing anything important. That even the president.
They're all dressed like they're about to go to the country club.
Yeah, going to the country
sip
club,
on some champagne,
playing polo. Just no one's really doing any work. They're just kind of. I guess these people all just have infinite amounts of money and they just stay on Elysium, or maybe Elysium doesn't have rent. If you're white, you're in, and you don't have a criminal record.
That's kind of what it feels like.
But yeah, these ships. I mean, it just feels like they just sat on them just to spite Earth, basically. And it seems like they're aware that Earth is mad at them because, I mean, who wouldn't be? But they're like, oh well, we know that they keep trying to get here and they're like kind of terrorizing us, but why give them that, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's basically like a point by point.
I guess that's everything we really wanted to cover.
Yeah.
Within the story. So why don't we have some closing comments? Tell me overall what you thought of Elysium.
If I was gonna suggest this movie, I mean, people that enjoyed District 9 and didn't really notice so much the allegory, just didn't mind it, might like this. Anyone that really enjoys sci-fi, any diehard sci-fi fan that can kind of turn off their brain and kind of just enjoy a bunch of laser guns being fired around for about 2 hours. They might, if you're looking for an interesting story, or if you're looking for characters, do yourself a favor and please do not go watch this movie. You will be sorely disappointed. Maybe people that enjoyed the Bourne movies might enjoy this, because I mean, even those had a semblance of plot, though. This movie really doesn't. So I don't know. I guess just diehard action fans, people that love Matt Damon, and someone who wants to turn off their brain and watch an action movie. Anyone looking for plot or characters or any kind of real substance in a movie probably should pass up on this until later on when it comes out on Netflix or something. What about you?
Well, it's interesting because I think we're kind of in the minority when it comes to this movie. I think a lot of people enjoyed this movie quite a bit, which is perfectly fine. Like I said earlier, I can respect what District 9 did. I just wasn't a fan of it. I just really think that this movie just sorely lacked a convincing story, and
There,
the allegory being pushed in your face was just too much for me.
I didn't feel like the nuance was there from District 9, because District 9 at least was an interesting standalone story by itself. I mean, a little weak,
It,
but
it was a unique,
even without the
a
allegory,
unique
it would have been
story.
an interesting idea. The idea
Yeah,
of having a hostage alien population on Earth is kind
yeah,
of
I agree.
interesting. But here, like, I mean, the concept is interesting from the trailers, but it's really not the focal point. It's all about this agenda that it's kind of being pushed along with the movie.
Which
And
I
I
think
think
is a huge disappointment
it's
for
kind of
me.
a ball and chain for everything else that happens in the movie, as opposed to District 9, which it's really kind of two separate things. There's an allegory, and then there's a movie. This one, the allegory is the movie and is the driving force of all the characters and the motivations. And
I feel like Neil Blomkamp, he has potential, but I think one of his main problems is that he tries too hard to fit a message that is relevant to today's society within his movies.
yeah,
And maybe it's just like you were saying earlier because we live so close to the border and that it gets shoved, in our face all the time. But it was just too much for me. Like it kind of took away the experience for me to where it's always in the back of my mind. I can't think of anything going on in the movie without thinking about, the message that they're trying to shove in my face. On another note, like we were saying earlier, I think the CGI is good. I think the weapons are really interesting, though I don't think they do some of them justice.
yeah.
But I do think that some of the weapons were very interesting. The cinematography was a hit or miss for me. The movie looked gorgeous, but as far as like what they decided as far as shots go, like the steady cam to the static, it was just a little too jarring for me at times. I couldn't really see what was going on. The acting was just super one dimensional. I don't think there was a single standout performance in this entire movie. I'm not going to say that any of the performances were flat out bad, but I don't think any of them were good either.
Each of them's marred by their own individual little thing. I can't understand Murdoch.
Kruger.
Jodie Foster is just strange.
Her accent that
She's
she tries is ridiculous.
just everything is about her is strange. Her character is very one dimensional,
Oh,
evil.
you know what we didn't discuss that we can bring up now is how her character changes at the end.
Oh yes,
Out
she.
of nowhere.
More spoilers. She gets stabbed by the same black water whatever like super secret mercenary that she hired.
Kruger.
Kruger. Who just gets mad. I don't know if like his face being reconstructed like scrambled his brain.
Well,
Or
he basically decides that he's going to lead Elysium.
yeah. So which is strange because he seems to be the way he's going about that doesn't seem. And I mean he's not an intelligent character, but he says he's gonna tear off Matt Damon's head.
Yeah.
At one point, and Matt Damon's head contains the reset codes.
Which
I suppose.
would completely
Yeah. So
even before then, Matt Damon or Kruger's about to die and he knows it.
Yeah.
For good this time.
Uh-huh.
So he basically tries he hooks Matt Damon up to like his suit.
Yeah.
And he's like, he pulls the thing on the grenade and he's like, we're gonna die together.
Uh-huh.
It's like, well, that just seems.
Yeah. It seems
Really-
like you're just kind of butthurt, bro. Like it just seems like you're mad. And
And then somehow Matt Damon's able to get out of that
He-
within enough time to where the bomb doesn't go off until Kruger's halfway falling down
he just
the
tears
rail.
off a piece of his exoskeleton. It's no big deal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Since that was another thing that let me bring up really quick because things keep on coming to mind. The fact that, and I don't know if you noticed this either, but Matt Damon at times was really really super weak, like almost less than human type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then like at other times it's like superhuman because of the suit.
Mm-hmm.
But there was never really a consistency between like the superhuman Max and the grounded Max.
See, that's where I disagree. I think it was very consistent. The parts where he was superhuman were when the plot called for it, And then when the plot didn't call for it, I noticed that he wouldn't be superhuman.
Oh, okay.
And so it was very consistent, actually. The director was very clever in that way. It was
Alright,
one of the things I
well.
really liked about the movie. It was very consistent. I knew exactly when the power switch was going to be turned on in the suit and when it would be flipped off. So
Well, you got me there.
yeah, all right. So yeah. So in conclusion, I mean, and I'm hesitant to say this because I know many people probably won't agree with us from what I've seen so far. Maybe the ratings will drop here because generally they start high and go a little bit lower, but we'll see.
And it's not like we wish this movie, bad things. I think
We both went into this fairly enthusiastically, I believe.
Yeah.
You were the one that actually wanted to go, and I wanted to go, just not that night, I guess, and maybe that influenced my judgment a little. But if I had to say anything, it's I stand by what I said earlier. If you are looking for a dumb action movie, it is that, and it's got great special effects and sci-fi moments, but a very weak story and character. And if you're okay with that, then you'll probably enjoy this movie.
I agree.
All right.